Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today with Sanam. She and I connected through TikTok, was it? I
Yep,
think, yeah.
TikTok video.
Yep. So she was talking about something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. So I invited her to come on to this podcast today. I don't want to waste even a second on this topic because I think there's so much to actually unpack.
Yeah.
So I'm going to first start off by welcoming you, Sanam. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this podcast today.
Of course, thank you for having me. I mean, anytime I have an opportunity to talk about AI, please. I am so excited.
Fantastic. So just to kind of like kick things off, let's first start by having you introduce yourself a bit. So, people don't know who you may not know who you are. So I just want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what's your background, and then we'll get into the topic at hand. So
Absolutely. Thank you. So, my name is Sanam. I have been working in the paid media space actually for about 9 to 10 years now. Started off at working at an agency, working for high caliber luxury beauty and fashion brands, running all of their advertising online, predominantly Meta and Google. And then I transitioned to starting my own agency, which I had for 6.5 years, again, servicing similar types of clients, luxury beauty and fashion brands, a little bit of lifestyle. Sold that last November after 6.5 years of business. And since then, I've been dabbling into consulting for a variety of different brands at different stages, which is really fun and exciting. And I've had a personal interest in AI. And I so wish I lived in the world of AI when I had my prime agency days, because it would have drastically changed the way I would have run businesses for both my own business and for my clients. But generally speaking, I'm a consultant. I'm deep diving into AI. I'm vibe coding, and this is my world now.
oh wow, that's amazing. And I can already sense that you have your fingers in a lot of different places like I do. So I think we're kind of like parallel pathing from that perspective as well. So the reason why I reached out to you a few weeks ago is that you were talking about a topic around AI shopping in particular, right?
Mhm.
And you had a couple of posts that you did on TikTok around that. So tell me what your interest is in that space. What you know help people understand what do we even mean by AI shopping as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. So AI alone is just pretty fascinating because it's growing rapidly. Like right now, we're 800 million active users weekly on ChatGPT, which is just mind blowing to think about.
mhm.
But then you think about all the different evolutions of AI. So now recently, OpenAI talked about that they're introducing this OpenAI shopping integration, first with Etsy, then they're rolling out with Walmart and Shopify, which like when you think about all the opportunity there, it's mind blowing. The reason this specific topic captured my attention is because of the opportunity that comes with it. So for example, if you're like a small Joe Schmo brand, there is so much opportunity for you to show up and make a big presence because it's kind of like an open playing field. It's not about the historical SEO data that you've spent years building up to or all the ad spend that you're putting behind it. It's more so about how you can show up in speaking to natural AI language for AI to be able to act as your distributor. But taking it back, the reason I was really interested in this because it's all about allowing instant checkout in one single platform. So instead of discovering a product on TikTok, then researching elsewhere, seeing if it's available at retailers, going to the brand website, adding to cart and checking out, you're now taking all of those touch points and setting them up in one single interface. So you're doing awareness, discoverability, education, add to cart and checkout in one single platform without needing to exit, which like from a consumer standpoint, from a marketing touch point standpoint, there's so much that comes into that experience alone that is fascinating to think about. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity that a lot of businesses aren't yet tapped into, which understandably because it is so new, but I'm excited to help bridge the gap for all those businesses and really dive deeper into this.
Oh my gosh, there's so much you said in that already, right? The fact that you have all these different touch points that we've have been working to optimize around, everything collapses into just one platform, right? I'm using this language. I'm curious to see how it resonates with you or not. I'm saying that the digital shelf is now a sentence,
Yes.
basically. Would
Yeah.
you agree or disagree with that?
I feel like it's moving towards that absolutely because again you have these like agents now that and these agents start to know you so well based off the memory and the chat history that you have with your specific chat GBT agent. So it's only going to
Mhm.
get to know you better and better, which means it is going to act like your personal tastemaker, your personal shopper. So you're
Yeah.
going to that one trusted source. You don't need to go to Google to verify that or TikTok to verify that. You're going to
Mhm.
make sure your tastemaker feels like it's a valid product for you when you're searching for it. So like you said, it went from like two paragraphs to one single sentence, arguably a fragment.
Yeah, so you use a word that I think a lot about too, which is trust, right? So and I kind of break it up into two parts in this one, and maybe there are more parts, and I'd love to kind of like have a conversation around this. One part is the trust that you as the user has of ChatGPT in that you're trusting ChatGPT to give you the right answer or the correct answer, however you want to frame it, right? But then there's a second part to this conversation, which is how does ChatGPT trust all the brands that are available on that topic you're discussing? How does it trust what brand to select?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And right now, this is where the opportunity comes in for brands at any level, whether you're small, large, heritage, or brand new startup. It's about making sure your data is legible for ChatGPT. It's not
Mhm.
ChatGPT's job to interpret the data. It's ChatGPT's job to parse the data. So are you feeding ChatGPT the right information? And so, like, for example, when you think of like chunky knit sweater, that's like one way to put it, or like chunky knit cute sweater. Then you have the actual ChatGPT way to put it, chunky knit merino wool sweater for layering for the winter time. Like
Mhm.
that gives you so much more descriptors and so much more to work with for ChatGPT to be able to serve your product once this instant checkout feature is available. So I don't even remember what you initially asked,
Yeah.
but basically the whole point is to be able to allow for discoverability with these key indicators that brands may not be engaging with right now because they're not set up to be able to be parsed out by ChatGPT.
So there were two parts I was asking basically. So trust is broken up with the consumer and ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT and the brands, right? So there
Right,
are two
yes.
different things going on here. So you talked about the second part, which is, how does a brand describe itself in language that ChatGPT would recognize and say it's the relevant product for the conversation that the user is having with ChatGPT, basically. So
Yes.
it's kind of like doing both things almost simultaneously, right? So in that process of trust, if that's the right word, even, have you kind of like seen stuff yet, or are you kind of like hypothesizing around how would that actually work? You gave it that example just now around the language that you would have to have the brand speak about. That's not typically the language that brands typically talk about, though, on their websites or anywhere for that matter, right?
Oh, trust me, as a consultant, I'm correcting this every single day. Like, specifically, my biggest hot take on this is bundle naming. A lot of brands in e-commerce always offer bundles as their kind of like gateway product because it allows you to sample multiple products versus just that one hero product. It allows
Hmm.
you to shop at a value. But a lot of times brands are positioning these bundles in these like cheeky type of verbiage that aligns with like their brand kind of overall vibe, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't speak to a new consumer that's coming to their website. And so this is kind of like this larger issue that ties into this ChatGPT LLM conversation for discoverability, because you're not able to really sell what the bundle is for, who it's for, why it exists. You're just setting it up as like the feel good bundle. It's like, okay, why am I feeling good? Like if it's a
Yeah.
skincare bundle, like what does it offer me? What is it going to do for my skin? It puts a lot of the onus on the consumer. And so this is where the brands need to really shift the perspective of how do I set it up so the agent can be my distribution channel for me, because I don't have that one-to-one with the consumer specifically in this channel.
Exactly. Do you have any kind of like construct, or is there some sort of like framework that you're using to help brands think that through at all, or are you not at that phase just yet? I'm just curious to understand where you are in terms of thinking
Yeah.
about that question.
I specifically asked them in conversation, I said, why should I buy this product? Who is
Hmm.
this product for? And then once they're able to answer that, we then work together to workshop it to get it to a very clear and concise way. But I make sure that we do not go past like 5 minutes in terms of workshopping it, because then you're going too much into the elements of like, how is this making sure this sits with the vibe of the brand? And like, you really need to make sure specifically for these bundles that I'm referencing, that it is in layman's term, who this product is for, why they need it, why it appeals to them,
Hmm.
versus like the feel good bundle that's 20% off when you buy it in a bundle versus buying the products individually. Like that's not going to sell it.
Interesting. So, I got so many questions. I'm just trying to make sure that I ask the right one in the right sequence. So, language plays a role, as you described it. The bundling, which means that there has to be metadata that has to be tapped into from Etsy or Shopify or Walmart to know exactly what the actual product could be. There are all those kinds of layers that's there, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. You want to make sure that your product data, your PDP information is as fleshed out as possible from a detailed perspective. So you want to make sure you have very
Mm.
clear titles, rich feature variables, ingredients, materials, sizing, use cases. Use cases is like by far probably the most important because Gen AI is growing in popularity. So people are now using very like human natural language to describe what they're looking for
Yeah.
versus making sure that they're setting up their language to be able to trigger an accurate search in Google organic search, for example. Like, it's very different. It's human language versus setting up for a computer. So it's working for you. So that's why you need to make sure all of your variants, all of your descriptors are extremely detailed.
But that has to be in the context of natural language, though, not in the context of product descriptors per se, or do you need both of them?
I would say there's a way to marry both, honestly. I think where the conversation is, where it gets kind of a little bit blurry, is where you're focusing so much on like the brand elements of like the specific kitschy verbiage that you have on Instagram and those types of mediums, which makes sense. And both can exist, both can be married together. But specifically for the PDPs, you need to make sure all of your descriptors are in as layman's terms as possible, while still maintaining your level of like brand elevation, to say.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, I get that. So, but as you do that, I think there is also a component which is you have to not just describe the use case. I think you have to also describe the moment that goes with that use case per se, if you know what I mean, right? So let me give you an example. If I'm planning to go do a trip as a backpacker, for 3 days or 4 days or whatever, versus going on a beach trip, if I'm having that interaction with ChatGPT saying, what should I take with me on a trip to go backpacking versus on a beach trip, right? That's the kind of conversation I would imagine would be happening between the user and ChatGPT. And then it's ChatGPT's job to go figure out, okay, if it's a backpacking trip, these are the kinds of products I would be recommending to you. Have you thought about that as part of your purchase list, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. So that's where the use cases comes into making sure those are in the descriptions. I 100% agree with you.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I was understanding that. So in that natural language piece of it, you have to almost like know what the consumer way of talking about it is, which could be 100 different ways or 1,000 different ways. But you almost have to kind of like set up ChatGPT in a way to be able to know that that's what you're referring to for your particular product in a way.
Exactly. 100%.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy, actually.
It's nuts when you think about it. Like what we've transitioned to from like years ago to now, like I just think of the days of back in 2016 when I could just throw up a stylized image of like this beautiful woman highlighting her blush and like it would just sell instantly for like a massive brand. But now like that same massive brand has to take into consideration so many different elements from the type of content that we're creating to be able to capture that exact same target consumer that we were then serving so easily with that one image. And so now when you enter into the play like this whole like Gen AI conversation, the natural language conversation, and then this instant checkout piece, it just adds a whole new element. But it's so interesting because before I feel like we're like leaning towards like elements of like adding these layers of like sexiness, so to speak, of like unique creative, making sure we're selling in a fun way, having the cool people wear it. And now we're kind of almost going backwards and stripping it of all that sexiness to make sure that it is actually as legible as possible for a machine to be able to learn, understand, parse out, and sell your product, which is so interesting when you consider like the landscape of how things have shifted.
But that means you're marketing to the machine, not the person per se. In a way, right?
In a way, you're not, yeah, you kind of are setting up the machine to do the marketing for you. Yeah. And so that's where I would say like the visual imagery really comes into play to complement like that layer of sexiness that we were talking about, but making sure like the verbiage is also tapping into the layman's terms to be able to reach new audiences.
So I hadn't thought about this before. So you're talking about even including images and even video perhaps as a way to also help you alongside the text that you could be inputting into ChatGPT.
So I actually haven't thought too much about the imagery per se because it's more so like this the search that you're typing and like the search that's popping up. But I think that the imagery still comes into play because you're able to kind of communicate what you were communicating with like the verbiage before that was very like kitschy and brandy. You're able to display that in the image, but also still kind of complement that with the layman's terms of verbiage.
You probably need both is what I'm hearing you say basically. Yeah, no, that makes sense because
like I'm still a consumer and I still want the sexy verbiage. I still want to align myself with that cool girl brand, but like I also want to make sure that the imagery like kind of speaks to the text that will then populate for me in my ChatGPT search.
Right. But I get that. I totally get that. But I guess where I'm going with this is that, because you have the multimodal, features on the phone with ChatGPT, you could start the video, you could take pictures and upload it into ChatGPT. I'm now wondering whether that's also something that they potentially, roll out as part of their final, solution, because if you're able to show pictures of other situations or scenarios and say, this is what I'm trying to get to, help me figure it out, that becomes a really interesting dynamic in a way, I would imagine.
I 100% feel like that's in the pipeline. Like, considering how far we've come over the past year, there's just so much to come. And I could see that absolutely you upload an image, video. I mean, I have friends right now that upload images to ChatGPT and say, like, what do you think of this outfit versus this one? And then, like, it'll recommend based off the history that the agent or the ChatGPT bot specifically has developed with that user to then guide them on their fashion choice, which is just wild to think about. So what you're saying, I don't feel like is far-fetched by any means.
Do you think companies like Pinterest would be in trouble with this?
No, because I feel like Pinterest alone is like so unique in what it offers. But I think what's important for platforms like Pinterest is to evolve with how people are evolving right now in terms of how they're digesting data, communicating, and looking and seeking out information. But like, I personally still have interest, and I'm a very active user of ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini. I use all the LLM platforms that exist for me right now, both for education and research purposes, and then for my own personal interest. But I still love Pinterest for the UI that it provides. It's a very specific curated experience. And what's nice is that it can be curated for any type of user, kind of like how the agent is like tailored towards that person. That's how I feel like Pinterest is for me visually. But again, it's about evolving to make sure that they're incorporating AI where it makes sense. I don't know exactly where that is yet, but just staying, keeping their foot on the pulse.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I actually think it's a pretty big threat for Pinterest, to be honest with you, because because if, for example, with these kinds of relationships that ChatGPT is building out, they already have, as you said, 800 monthly active users, right? That's a pretty big deal. That matches, if not, overtakes companies like Pinterest in terms of active users. And the fact that if they are going to be able to offer, direct purchasing, that just changes the ballgame completely. Because with Pinterest, you have to still go to another platform and buy. In ChatGPT's case, like you said at the very beginning of this show, you can buy, you can discover and buy from ChatGPT itself. So you've completely shortened that path to purchase completely. So that's why I think that's the threat, I think, that I see for a company like Pinterest. But that's just me. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, because I would say, like, for me, I don't use it to like discover products to then purchase and check out. I don't feel like Pinterest ads really speak to me as much. I use it for a lot of outfit inspiration. So I'm constantly saving like different outfits that I see to different boards and then referencing those boards later. And then also for me, a massive like discovery tool for recipes. I love like certain recipes of like, one day I want low carb, one day I want like super sweet and savory and like all the sugar possible. So it really just depends, but I use it for a lot of recipe discovery. And so I will say, for the amount of discovery that it gives me, I don't feel like it's a competitor yet, but again, there could be an opportunity down the line where like it does pose a threat, but there's so much that has to come with that and so much retraining as well.
I get that. I totally get that. So if you're a brand, let's start with the brand, and we'll get to the independence in a second. But if you're a brand, what would be the I would be shocked if many brands have actually done anything just yet. I would imagine, but I know that people are all talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. But I don't know if people have necessarily figured out a pathway to figure it out, because obviously ChatGPT hasn't released it yet, at least with Walmart. But what would be your counsel to people in terms of where do you even start your journey and the process for figuring all of this stuff out? What would you say to them?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost is playing with the tool. I feel like a lot of people just don't use it as much as they should. Like, they'll have it like correct an email, refine it, whatever, here and there, maybe once or twice a week. But like, that's not really using it to its capability. And I feel like people also haven't mastered the ability to prompt either. So I think that's one way to exercise using it. But going furthermore, knowing you have a business and the specific products that you have, that you specialize in, your hero products, whatever it may be, I would just test a variety of search queries. And especially if you have your Google Search Console or your Google Ads, take those keywords that you already have that align with your business that people are searching for, and find your business through discovery that way. Take those, plug them into ChatGPT, and see what populates organically, and understand what type of businesses are showing up there. I mean, obviously, like the instant checkout and those features aren't available yet, but know that like what businesses are already doing a great job at showing up organically on ChatGPT, and then how can you use that information to refine your positioning and your product standpoint. And then from there, I would constantly use that information to refine your product data for machines and make sure that like your positioning is not just based on vibes, but it's based on data, and it's based on accurate keywords that are helping you like pull in and populate in ChatGPT, and then just continue to refine from there. I feel like we don't need to overcomplicate this right now. It's more so what's showing up, why are they showing up, and then how can I show up and continue test, iterate, test, iterate.
Mm-hmm. Funny you say that, because I actually built a custom GPT agent on ChatGPT to do exactly what you described. So,
I love it. Use
you know,
AI.
it's doable right now. And as I was kind of like playing around with that, with exactly what you described, actually, what I realized is that you could actually even take social media conversations. You could take focus group conversations that you've had, and you can use that as a source data to upload into like my agent, for example. So it gives you the kind of natural conversational phrases and words that are being used around your brand or your category. And from that, you can then start actually see how you can actually start influencing the process, basically.
You just leveled up my answer and made it so much more efficient. I love that. That is the purpose of AI. It's like, how can you
Yeah.
make things in your everyday routines more efficient to allow you the time to work on things to like better your business or work on things that only your brain can work on. It's fascinating. I love being challenged like that. Sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh yeah, I can use AI to actually make that better when I consider myself an AI expert.
Well, offline, I'll be more than happy to show you what I've built out, basically. But for the
Love it.
benefit of the audience, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We both know enough to be dangerous, I guess, at this point in time.
Very lethal.
But we I personally feel like both of us have had enough of experience in thinking about this space, probably more than others at this point. Not because we're smart or anything. It's just we've had the time to think about it. So we've at least got a bit of a roadmap that's been built around that. I think that's a fair statement to make, right?
I would assume, yes.
So coming back to, so I talked about the brands, but what about like the smaller companies that are on Etsy or on Shopify or whatever? What kind of advice would you give them? Because my personal opinion is that you can actually, this is leveling the playing field for everybody, right? So if you're a big brand, you have challenges. If you're a small brand, you've got major opportunities through ChatGPT, in my opinion, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like we talked about before, it's like the level field is really the field is leveling out in terms of like the ability that people have to show up if they're using it right. And I think you had posted something recently about like doing a test search to see like what showed up. And like it wasn't actually like the top few stores that had shown up. It was like a mid-tier store that had shown up based off their keywords and their metadata that was allowing them to be able to show up. So I think right now it goes back to that same thing. It's about making sure you are setting up your information to be fed to a bot and that bot can parse it out.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm beating a dead horse by constantly saying this, but it's really just like challenging brands to take a step back, especially like brands like Etsy, where it's a lot about like small artisans that are making these beautiful handcrafted pieces in their homes and doing a great job. But that's like, they don't have the marketing background. Sometimes they get so caught up in like making sure like the visuals and the verbiage can sound so whimsical. And like, that is so wonderful for the brand, but it's also so important to be able to leverage the opportunities that show up, especially because right now, a lot of businesses on Etsy aren't yet eligible for the shopping feature. They have to enable it. They have to make sure they're US based. They have to make sure there are certain features, kind of check out. But really making sure that you set yourself apart by adding different keywords and different metadata to make sure that you are able to show up properly in the LLM.
So in those keywords, do you think we should be more functionally focused, or should there be language around even like emotional elements that could be relevant to the brand, perhaps?
I think more so it's about the direct descriptors and then the use cases. I would say emotional elements, I would rank it like tertiary for me personally, because like when I use Gen AI, I don't really like use emotive type of language. I'm using like very specific use case type of language. So that's where I personally would fall. But again, because you can have authority control over what you're inputting, I feel like it's no harm in adding these like kind of emotive layers and seeing what eventually populates. In a dream world, I would hope that OpenAI, when this instant checkout shopping feature is like more advanced and we have like a year's worth of data, that they allow brands to access like query information and like specifically like click-through rate with the queries that they're showing up for, so they can continue to refine and iterate. But right now it's like, why not put it all in there? You can control as much information or you can control however much information that you put in there as possible. So why not make it as beefed up, as long as you have your priorities, your first and your secondary of making sure that you have your like primary descriptors and your use cases in place.
There's actually somebody's made a comment through LinkedIn. She's asking, I'd love for you folks to give perspective on how AI is progressing towards understanding/reporting human emotional output. So what I just asked, considering marketing is more focused on need states and tapping into emotional jobs to be done. So, so in a way, you kind of like answered the question already, but I think there's, there's the actual use case itself, which is functional, but then there's also emotive language that you could also include. There's no harm in doing it at this point in time, I would imagine,
Exactly.
right?
And I do feel like we'll get to a place where ChatGPT will provide users that information, specifically the storefronts.
Yeah.
But I also do wonder if it'll be like a pay to play type of environment, kind of like with Google Ads and how they like went from their organic search to then having a very kind of in-depth monetizable product. I could see that happening definitely in the next few years, because like because the agents are acting as distributors, and ultimately distributors are all monetized.
That's true. Pay to play, yeah. I've been giving some thought to this. I'm actually kind of conflicted on that particular point though, because for a company like Walmart, right? They will, they're are they the ones who are going to be paying ChatGPT, or is it going to be, a pass-through charge back to the manufacturer?
I would assume the latter.
Right. So that's where
Because
it
why
gets a little
not?
bit.
It's a great opportunity to be able to pass that back. It's kind of like, let's say if like Amazon and ChatGPT had also the same instant checkout partnership, and like Amazon has millions of merchants, you would assume just like on their own website and their own marketplace that they have their merchants pay to show up not organically, show up in these paid positions on their 3 different types of sponsored ad placements. And so similar to the way the cost is passed to the consumer, like Amazon is not ranking and paying for that. It's like their merchants that they pass that back to. So I would assume in this Walmart case, the Etsy case, absolutely, if it does become monetized, it would be passed back to the specific merchants to be able to make the calls and how they want to show up.
Do you think that would be more? I guess that would be more efficient than what we are currently doing, though. I would imagine, right? It could actually still be a win for the manufacturer as well. Or do you think that's going to be an incremental cost to them? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that, because doing SEO and doing, paying promote, trade margins to to Amazon or Walmart, that's pretty expensive, right? So is this an incremental expense, or is this going to be something that could actually lead to a lower cost for the manufacturer? I don't know how that's going to land. I'm not even sure if I'm even thinking about the right question here at this point in time, but
Yeah. I think personally, it would be treated as any other ad platform, in that it would make sense if you're able to get it to a profitable place.
yeah.
And like obviously you have your brand keywords and then your non-brand keywords, and how that would be able to, I mean, granted, if it is even keyword targeting, like there's so much that goes into it, obviously, because like Google and Pinterest are heavily based keyword targeting platforms, and TikTok is introducing that as well. Whereas like Meta, Instagram, and Facebook, they're more so about interest-based targeting, and you're just hoping that your product resonates with that segment audience.
Yeah.
So, and like there's also like the conversation about uploading first-party data and all the things that go into like a traditional ad platform. But I mean, in this case, I would say it would be profitable, because if you're able to get in front of UIs, especially when you have a platform that currently has 800 active million users a week, that's only going to continue to grow over the next few years, like it would make sense so long as they have the tools and mechanisms in place for the merchants to be able to get the insights and information, and to be able to have control over how they're showing up. So I would say it's really dependent on ChatGPT's setup of it all, but that's definitely not off the table.
Do you think that if they were to do that, do the pay to play approach, then that would actually kind of like, corrupt the algorithm?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that would be a bit, I don't know. Do I prefer one option or the other? I'm not 100% sure just yet,
As someone who has extensive experience in the paid ad space, I would love for ChatGPT to remain an organic marketplace and there's no pay to play. But naturally, just based off of us living in a capitalistic world, I can 100% see that transitioning. Yeah, I personally would not be a fan of that.
I think that's where I am right now too. But
Yeah.
these are the kind of questions, though, I think we should be thinking about it. We should be kind of like having a game plan, especially if you're on the brand side, of saying, how do I want to play in this space? And what should I jump in early, or should I just wait and see how things unfold? I don't know if waiting is actually a good idea in this scenario. What are your thoughts on that question?
I feel like there's no right or wrong approach, but I would say like my initial thought is to always get in early. I personally love getting in early. And there's a lot of downsides with getting in early with any type of new type of ad platform, just because there's so many bugs. It hasn't been proven. You're kind of acting as like a guinea pig to be able to get your own data, versus I feel like now brands are like jumping on TikTok ads, and not even all the brands are jumping on TikTok ads yet, because it's still relatively new despite it being seasoned for quite some time.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I remember setting up my brands with like setting up TikTok ads. There was a lot of approvals to be able to get in place from the platform alone to be able to serve. And even then, it didn't change the business, but it was fascinating to be able to get in early. And again, I'm always a proponent of getting in early, because it really guides how you want to invest there, and you're able to make a decision quick, because you don't have to spend that much money to be able to understand if there's value. I would say just dedicate a few $1,000s to be able to see, okay, is there opportunity here? And then from there, it's not about, okay, was I top line profitable in this? But it's like parsing out the data and understand, were there any pockets where we could invest in further to be able to drive discoverability for us. But the discoverability piece, I can go on so many tangents, because like once you have discoverability with ChatGPT, I don't know if this is a question that you have, but like I think it's so important for when brands start to be able to drive more customers with ChatGPT to have an entirely separate communication email cadence for those consumers, specifically once instant checkout is at play, because you don't know if they're coming to your website at all. You don't know if they've had any interactions with your brand at all. So there's a lot of education to be able to be done with that. And I would say the most similar comparable situation would be brands that drive a lot of sales for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and they get an influx of new customers that are just shopping sale periods. And so for those customers that are brand new, have never had any touch points with the brand, you want to similarly parse them out and educate them in an entirely different type of sequence to be able to make sure that they understand the brand, to hopefully get like frequent purchases and build up that LTV.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, like
Sorry, I feel like I went on like 4 tangents on that one question.
there's a lot to unpack there, and to me, like, so there's the top of the funnel where there's a discoverability aspect that you described, and I think you're totally right that there's going to be new consumers coming in, first time consumers. How do you parse them, and do they even touch any of your other touch points or not? That becomes interesting. But I guess part of that is ChatGPT doing it on your behalf in a way, because it may not be. You may not even need to do it as a user, because if ChatGPT is going to your website, it's going and looking at social media engagement on your brand, or maybe it's checking other things as well. And if it's parsing all that information together and giving you that recommendation, technically you don't need to go do any of that stuff yourself.
Yeah, you
assuming
can
that you trust
purchase
ChatGPT.
without going to the brand website at all, which is insane. It's
So
almost like
if that,
another retailer, but like not.
yeah, right. So if it's truly going to be your personal assistant, you're basically delegating to ChatGPT all those different things that you would have done yourself.
Exactly. It's crazy. You're literally treating it like it's a personal assistant for you, extracting all the information, doing the discoverability, the awareness, the education, and then just giving you a, hey, here's your add to cart button, check out instantly in the same UI. And it's scary for the brands in the sense that they could be getting an influx of consumers that have really low LTV and just bring down their total average LTV value for their customer.
Yeah.
Or it could be leveraged to their best abilities, where they have an entirely new sales channel for them that is doing so much work for them. And so it really just depends. It depends on how you're looking at it, how much information you're supplying to the agent to be able to educate the consumer. And then it's how ChatGPT is then educating to the consumer, because we don't have access to that information just yet with like the little bit of Etsy data that we have so far.
Yeah.
And so it's really going to be fascinating to see how brands are able to like kind of take that and leverage it. But there's going to be a lot more education to be done. So I think brands specifically should invest in like dense email flows for these new customers.
Yeah. So actually, there's one step before that I think that might be relevant as well, which is that if the brand is thinking only about their website, or they're thinking only about their email, or any other social media channels that they're using, I don't think that's enough anymore.
No.
I think they have to be thinking about it almost like a publisher model, where you have to be thinking about what is your reach and frequency of content that's out there, so that when ChatGPT is searching, it's finding the right, relevant, and most recent information to help make its recommendation to the user at the end of the day, right? So there's all those different aspects, I think. So for the reach part of it, I don't mean it in the context of how many consumers it reaches. I'm talking about how many different touch points it's reaching as well. right? So if you're, for example, a beauty brand, are you showing up on the beauty journals? Are you showing up, in recommendations from influencers or not? Are those things going to be relevant or important as part of the search engine, not the search engine, the recommendation engine that ChatGPT would be using at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's actually a great point that I didn't even think about because, when you see a product on TikTok, you go to the brand website, you engage with the Instagram, you check out, great, done. But now when your agent, which is essentially your assistant, aggregating all that information for you online, there's a lot of trust that needs to be established. There's a lot of credibility. There's making sure it appeals to the use case. There's making sure it's price friendly, it's price competitive. And kind of like the first two, the social aspects, the credibility of it, the trust, a lot of that will come from publishers, including your brand name. It comes from influencers incorporating you naturally into their everyday content. And so that is going to be information when the platform is acting as an aggregator to kind of like sell the user top to bottom, making sure it's hitting off every single checkpoint.
Exactly, right. So if let's assume for a moment that I'm right, and it's doing exactly that, then to me it completely changes your marketing approach in terms of how you're actually putting content out there, right? Because it's not just about the website anymore. It's a lot more detailed in terms of how you're sharing content. So
Yeah.
to me, those are the kinds of shifts that will have to happen. And you know I've heard people say, oh, this is maybe like the next generation of SEO. This is nothing about SEO. It's actually a lot more than that, quite frankly speaking. It's an entirely new skill set, in my opinion, kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's a different way to think about it. Because in SEO, you're just thinking about all like the back end keywords you're putting on your website and then like just making sure you have tons of blog content so then Google can pick it up. Then it's a natural long cycle to be able to get it to the top. And like all your competitors are doing the same thing. And it's not really much of a pay to play game because you're all kind of bidding for the same keywords and showing up, hoping you show up on like the third page even. This is entirely different. This is how can you be able to make yourself legible to a machine?
Right. And because of that, I think one of the things that might end up happening, these are new jobs.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You have like AI consultants and AI experts popping up left and right, AI agencies. Like I'm seeing so many specifically targeting how you can like use AI for businesses and like make your business, essentially more efficient internally.
Yeah.
And also like the external aspect of it. But now when you have like this instant checkout feature, it's like, how can you make sure that all of your PDP information is set up to be able to be understood by the language that is the bot? And so I do agree that there will be tons of jobs and consultants popping up. And it kind of makes everyone stay on their toes because like right now it is the age of AI. Everyone is saying AI is stealing jobs. And I personally don't agree with that. I mean, in certain cases, yes, I absolutely agree. It can be argued. But in many cases, it can make people more efficient at their jobs. And so to be able to leverage it, to be able to do more with what you were able to do before, because you have this agent, these bots that are helping you left and right with your tasks that would be manual labor that would take 3 hours of your day, poof, gone, done in 15 minutes, insane. So it's another one of those situations where you really need to stay on top of it, whether it's someone learning how to do it internally and kind of iterating, testing, and learning, or bring in one of these new AI type of consultants that will be able to tackle it.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where I was going with that question, because I believe that I've always believed when you have major disruptions, there's going to be a decrease in traditional roles that have been around for a while because of the disruption, but there'll be an increase of new roles that will emerge. I think we're literally at that inflection point now where everyone's been afraid of losing their traditional roles, but now we're starting to see the emergence of potential new roles that could come about because of this.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a bit of creativity, there's a bit of risk taking, and there's a little bit of agility that's going to be required on company side to say, hey, we need to test our way through this, and that means we will need to have a new set of skilled experts that we may or may not have within our organization. So could they be taught within the company? Possibly, right? That could be another way to retain jobs. But there could also be a demand for new people with new certifications and things like that as well, is what I'm kind of like thinking about,
Yeah, and you have to have an interest in it. And like what's fun is like it's so new. We all have access to the same information. Like there's nothing specific. There's no historical data that people have that they're able to leverage and monetize. It's like this is brand new information. Once instant checkout launches, we're all in the same playing field, getting our hands dirty in the mix, kind of playing, testing, iterating, and see what pops up, see how we adjust and iterate. And so I think that's what makes it so fun. Like you can have experts pop up left and right with no prior experience, because how would they have experience?
Exactly, right. And having grown up in the insights world, primarily within the marketing, broader marketing space, to all the people who are, in the measurement space in particular, how are we going to measure all this stuff?
Yeah.
Right. And like just before we got on the podcast, I was sharing with you some numbers. You know, it's not just measuring the number of people who could potentially be interacting with this kind of technology. By the way, BCG released some numbers this week where they said roughly 20% of users in the US are already using ChatGPT from a shopping perspective. Think about that, 20%. And another 38%, was it 38%? No, another 28%, excuse me, were considering to use, Gen AI as part of their shopping, journey. That's roughly half the population potentially.
It's crazy. Like the
It's
opportunities are
mind
really
blowing,
endless. Yeah.
right? So there's going to be a measurement. There's going to be an attribution question around this. There's going to be, questions around, do we even have the right metrics to measure?
Yeah.
Right? All these questions are unknowns right now.
They're all big question marks. And I feel like obviously we'll need to measure like the same typical conversion rate, AOV, return purchase refunds, and all of those things. But like, I think it's so important that we like specifically deep dive into the AI consumer and the instant checkout consumer,
Mm.
and not do an apples to apples comparison to your everyday channel consumers, not your email, your organic search, even your paid search, your paid social, all of those types of channels. Because again, there's a high likelihood that they will have way fewer touch points when it comes to then ultimately converting on your brand versus all of your other channels that have your traditional touch points in place. So I think that'll be interesting. And I think I'm personally very interested once instant checkout is enabled, just to see if OpenAI will be providing these merchants with more information and more metrics to be able to like learn and leverage and like make their product better. But it really just depends on like how they position themselves. So we're kind of like waiting and reacting to that. But otherwise, it's like just getting creative with what we have, because there's only so much that we have to work with. But then it's also just making sure that like we're doing the manual work, we're leveraging what we have on the back end, and we're seeing what's coming. It's so hard because it's like this big question mark where we don't know what's to come, but like we just have to react once it arrives. And
Yeah.
the metric space is pretty tough, especially because there's so much that we won't have access to for a very long time.
Agreed. The metrics are going to catch up after a period of time, right? So that's going to be the hard part for everyone. But there's also another space that I've been thinking about, and again, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I could see, I think it was you who told me this, when I first talked to you, that the retail media networks are big growth spaces, from what I understand, right? So I wonder how that plays in or factors into this conversation that we're having as well, right? Because I could see Walmart saying, "Hey, we're investing in our retail media network." Basically, I forget what it's called right now off the top of my head, but does that connect into this? Is there some sort of integration point there? I would assume yes, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think with like Walmart's Connect, and like Target has a version of it, Amazon has a version of it, all these big marketplaces, like they're offering kind of sponsorships to show up. I think they'll have no choice but to adapt to this new AI piece once it kind of gains traction, because that's where customers are searching. And ultimately, you have to spend your resources where the customers are. And if more and more people are using ChatGPT weekly, which if we're already at 800 million weekly now, it's like by the time the instant checkout becomes normalized, I could see us going to like 1 billion users weekly. It's like users are using it. And so where the users are, the brands, the retailers, the companies, the merchants of any sizes, they will need to adapt to that, because like if we want to get discovered, if we want new consumers, that's where we have to be. So it'll be interesting to see how they'll shift their model. Like if they'll incorporate like the instant checkout, like if instant checkout does become like a bidding play, or if they want to somehow, I don't know, do some type of like proprietary bidding internally to then spit it to chat. I have to see it. Like I'm so curious to understand how this will work out. But I do think that there will be integrations with, like, there will be some type of world there's adjustments in their retail marketplaces. But B, I think it'll be fascinating to see how they'll go about it, just because like there is an ecosystem that exists in each of those retail merchants and marketplaces right now, and they'll have to adapt.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, all these are unknowns, right? And it feels a bit speculative, but actually, is it really speculative? I think we're kind of like in the ballpark. Is what I think, So
Yeah. I mean, it's just still so new. Like, we don't know what it, because I'm personally very interested in once the instant checkout feature is enabled for Shopify merchants. Because, like, I mean, I'm shopping Shopify brands every single day, left and right. And, like, how is that going to affect my clients? Like, how are they going to be able to adapt to that? How is Shopify going to show you internally, like, what the channel is for a ChatGPT client? Because sometimes Shopify really struggles to be able to denote, like, a Google search versus a Google paid organic. And so, yeah, we're on the cusp, but, like, it's still so new.
Yeah. Do you think there are, and you may not know much about this, or maybe you do, I don't know, but Rufus from Amazon has been something that's been around for a few months now, it seems like, right? So I saw a data point yesterday that there are roughly $10 billion in revenue being generated through Rufus alone at Amazon.
Yeah.
So given that data point and given what they are offering, so it's like basically like a prompt, mechanism. You can type in your prompt and it'll then give you recommendations as to what products would be relevant to your prompt. Basically, that's what Rufus does right now. I wonder if that is the reason why ChatGPT and OpenAI kind of went down their path. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm so curious. I could argue yes to no, like, yes, absolutely, because, like, that's the way the field has been kind of, like, shifting with these existing merchants. But then also no, because, like, they're able to see their own search queries and what people are searching for, and that people are using it for discoverability for shopping different brands. Like, I've used it to find hotels, specific brands, companies that I'm looking for services of. And so, like, naturally, I would say, like, the next shift in that, the next evolution would be to check out in the platform directly. But I do wonder what the percentage will be specifically, like, in terms of how much GPT will take and all of those things. But I think this was a natural evolution just based off their search queries that they were getting, kind of like how Google, the natural step once they build Google search organically, seeing all these queries, then, okay, how can we monetize it? It's just like the evolution of, like, how it happened. So I think right now they're building the ability to like, communicate and recommend products. Then they'll be able to instant checkout. Then they'll be able to monetize based off of that. I think that's, like, a multi-layered approach based off how they're shifting.
Wow. This is, yeah, you're right. I completely understand what you're saying, and it's going to be, yeah. I think we just have to wait to see what they come up with. But I think you're 100% right on that. So
yeah, there's a lot to happen. It's going to be really exciting. I'm personally really excited because change is fun, and, like, it keeps us on our toes as marketers. It keeps us on our toes to just be aware of what's happening, and then, like, it's like, okay, well, how can we get ahead of the pack, because it's all so new. Like, we're all the same level.
Yep. So dare I even ask you this question? If you were to look forward a couple of years, is that even the right question at this point? Because we don't even know the next iteration that's about to happen on us, right? I'm just curious to hear, based on everything you're seeing, where are we headed in all of this stuff? Are we going to see a scenario where, if ChatGPT, Walmart, Etsy, Shopify becomes a big deal, what does that mean for companies like Google and search engine optimization? What does it mean for Amazon and their website, buying online? What does it even mean for buying in store? Have you given some thought to those kinds of questions at all, or no?
Yeah, I think that SEO is still going to be at play for all types of businesses, because ultimately, like, the SEO that you're doing for Google is still SEO for AI. It's just a little bit different because you're getting more specific with AI. But I think, like, the SEO absolutely still comes into play. In terms of Google, I mean, I would picture a place not in the next 5 years. I mean, maybe the next 5 years when you think about what can happen in terms of technology improvements. But, like, I do think we might get to a place where Google search will be obsolete, because ChatGPT's searches are just so much more qualified. You're not clicking through your searches in Google search, like, looking through, like, okay, is this article relevant to me? Is this the one I'm looking for? ChatGPT is literally telling you this is what you need.
Yeah.
Like, tailored to you versus finding what you need. And, like, those are two very different approaches in how to go about discoverability. And so when something is tailored to you, you naturally want more of that. And when it has the memory and it's continuing to learn more about you and better cater to what your needs and interests are, then it's only going to become smarter. It's only going to become more efficient. And it's like your personal assistant on your phone. And why would I ever go to organic search? I rarely use organic search. If I use organic search, it's because I want a quick Gemini answer.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm wanting to click on any of the articles. And if I click on the articles, it's because Gemini is sourcing them. And so
Right.
I am very rarely using organic search anymore, which is a wild thing to say out loud, because
Yeah.
like that's been our primary mode of discoverability for years now. And like
Mhm.
we've become so accustomed to it. But like now my brain is retrained to think about, okay, if I have a question, which LLM am I going to ask?
So on that point, though, a question I should have asked you earlier in the conversation. It just occurred to me that I missed this. Do you feel that there'll be certain product categories where they're more likely to be used through ChatGPT versus others? So let's pick an example, right? Toilet paper. Low involvement category. Why would I even want to go through ChatGPT to think about toilet paper versus say skincare? High engagement category. I want to know what I'm putting on my skin, right? And is it going to give me the kind of like result that I'm looking for? Do you have any thoughts on how brands that are thinking about, depending on the degree of engagement consumers have with it, would that make a difference in this particular instance?
Oh, absolutely. I think brands that have a lot of like categories with complexity and like a lot of comparison values, I think
Mhm.
those are subject to like really being able to leverage ChatGPT, because there's so many like, so for example, like skincare, like, is this vitamin C stable, or why should I choose this vitamin C over the other? If this vitamin C is $120, this vitamin C serum is $20. Why is this one significantly better than the other? Like, there's a lot of comparison values that you can ask ChatGPT specifically about skincare and then beauty and like that whole sector. Same
Mhm.
thing with home and kitchen. Like, if I want to buy a Dutch oven, but I'm a single girl, like I cook 4 times a week, but like I don't really meal prep too often. Which Dutch oven size do I need? 2 quart, 5 quart? I'm not sure. Which
Yeah.
instant pot should I get? Should I get this, or should I get this toaster oven that has multiple features and that acts as an air fryer too? Like
Yeah.
these types of categories where you can ask A, like questions that apply to your lifestyle, and B, just comparison of like the different types of models. I think those is where like they're really going to shine with this instant checkout feature, because the discoverability will be so much more enhanced again, which is why
Mhm.
like the use cases descriptors are so important. But I think where the categories that'll probably need to do a little bit of work are ones that A, have like a big personal element to it, or like an aesthetic eye to it, that like you need a very specific approach when it comes to recommending a
Mhm.
specific style or product or service to buy. And by no means are these categories like ill-equipped, especially because AI agents are just becoming smarter and understanding how you operate, how you work, and like your taste.
Mhm.
I think that will just require a little bit more maintenance upfront to be able to get them to be set up. So I'm talking about like fragrances, furniture, art and decor, those types of things.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that's out of the question by any means. Like I said earlier, like my friend literally will upload 2 codes to ChatGPT of her wearing them and say which one looks better based off A, my colors that I've already given you and that you have awareness of, and B, my personal taste, and C, where I live with the weather. And
Yeah.
so the fact that it's able to really develop an opinion and then provide a recommendation based off the attributes it knows about the user, I think that is where like these types of specific categories will need a little bit more work up front. Or maybe it's just a matter about making sure the user has enough information that they've trained their bot on to be able to
Mhm.
then kind of tie in these recommended businesses. But
Yeah.
I think that's where the two categories really differ. It's about making sure you have complexity in terms of your variabilities where you can compare and contrast pretty easily. And then also the ones that require taste. How can you bridge the two?
Yeah. But I think there's also a third category, which
Okay.
I think is also an interesting one. So you mentioned earlier about promotions, right? People who come in during, Cyber Monday or Black Friday, they're coming in for deals, right? Let's I'll reframe it a little bit to say, let's say that the people who are on a budget, right, especially in this environment that we're in right now, right?
Mhm.
um, Imagine if ChatGPT is able to say to you, hey, if um, I have a sense of what you're buying, through Walmart or whatever, toilet paper, shampoos, whatever, right? Things that you're buying habitually, let's say. But here's how you can actually optimize your budget if you were to buy these kinds of products instead of the ones that you're currently buying, so that you can
True.
maintain your budget, right? That to me would be, is it acting like a financial advisor? Yes, in a way it is on your budget, basically, right? But I could see that being a very new use case that could happen, right?
And it
What do you
also
think?
adds a lot of margin pressure to the businesses because you're being
Completely.
compared and contrasted so easily now, and like they're creating these custom comparison tables. Like we've all seen ChatGPT give us tables of like, here's option A, B, C, or D based off what you need and what you're looking for. And like to be able to just do that with all these household products, whether it's like a low AOV or a high AOV product, even, it's like there's going to be a lot more competition, almost kind of these internal conversations of like, are we priced competitively enough, but also making sure that we're still able to maintain a healthy profit, because now we're being compared to different products, maybe that we wouldn't have even considered to be a competitor to begin with, but now they're looking at us side by side. So what do we do and how do we handle this?
Exactly. And that's exactly why I brought that up, because I think, even for low engagement categories, I think there is a place where a tool like ChatGPT could be helping consumers. It could even be helping predict and say, hey, you're a family of 5 or family of 2, and based on your prior purchases, this is what you need to do next month, kind of thing. Or maybe if you can stretch it out by, you're going to be on vacation next week, you don't need to buy, until 2 weeks from now, kind of thing. Whatever it is, it's kind of like, delegating part of your brain in a way to ChatGPT to help you do all that kind of stuff that we do, day in and day out, and week in and week out, basically.
Saving you space in your brain, my favorite way to use ChatGPT.
I like that, actually. I'm going to use that shamelessly as well, if you don't mind.
Please do. Like I'm waiting for the day that Amazon is fully integrated with OpenAI, where I can literally just type, please pause this subscription, please reorder this. And I know I have that ability with like my Alexa at home and all of that, but like, I just love my agent. I love them all in one place. I love that I can access them and have different reasons and resources for them. And so to be able to do all that in one interface as like an avid frequent shopper of Amazon products and its convenience, I think that's going to be massive. But again, I don't think that's far off. I feel like that's in the near future, considering A, the success with Rufus, B, the integrations that are already coming out with Walmart, and then Shopify, and C, I just feel like with the pipeline of things, it'll be fairly soon, sooner than we think.
And the crazy thing is the other retailers have not said a word yet. So that's the crazy thing. The Targets of the world, the Krogers and the Publixes of the world, not a squeak yet. So I wonder what they're up to.
Very curious.
Exactly. I don't know if you realized, but we've been talking for almost an hour. Did you know that?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's so much to say, and there's so much more.
Exactly. So let's end with this last question. If you're thinking about, everything we talked about, if there's one, piece of advice or one, some counsel that, that you would want to give our audience, what would that be?
It would be to write for intent, not aesthetic.
Okay.
It ties into this conversation that we've been having earlier. It's like you can get lost when you're so focused on the aesthetic and the vibes of things, but at the end of the day, is that going to translate to a new consumer? Not always. And so making sure that it's entirely clear. And then now with this ChatGPT OpenAI conversation, that's even more of a prominent piece of information than before.
Amazing. I totally understand that. Sanam, this has been fantastic. Let's do this if you're open to it. Once they actually release the final product, whenever that happens, I've heard it could happen in the next couple of weeks. It could be even early next year. Who knows when it happens? Would you be open to coming back on and we can talk about, and diagnose what they've actually released? Would you
Definitely. I'm excited to play with it, see what happens, and start forming our opinions about what brands should be doing next.
Okay, so I'm going to put you down as a repeat guest here on the show. So,
awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you so much for giving your counsel. This has been absolutely incredible. I know the time flew by, because there was so much to share. And for the audience, if you think about all the stuff that we've been talking about, this is a new area for everybody, as Sanam was saying. And we all have to learn together. So please share. Put your comments in the chat, or reach out to either one of us or both of us. We'd be more than happy to respond back and share with you what we think, or we can at least point you in the right direction if we don't know what the answer is at this point in time. But thank you again, everybody, for joining. I'll be back for my last show of the year, believe it or not. I try to do 20 every year. This was number 19. So I have one more left for the year, and then we'll be back again in 2026. So thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care.
Bye.